Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Allison Boyle, one of the facilitators at Quest for Life, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to Quest Connect, the way that we connect with you on the first Sunday of every month. And I'm aware that this particular Sunday is also Father's Day, so a shout out to all the fathers that are out there, and I imagine that maybe we won't have too many people joining live because there may be a lot of people currently celebrating. So until we we see if more people are going to join us, let's just do what we always do and start by coming to our senses. And I've just been given a little message that's all good so that you can hear me and you can see me. So sorry for fiddling with my phone there. So let's just start by taking 3 conscious breaths. And maybe if you can make the breath out just a little bit longer than the breath in, that just helps to relax the nervous system. Close your eyes if that's available to you or you'd like to, or lower your gaze. And just start by becoming aware of what you can touch, your sense of touch. Feet on the floor, clothing against the skin, air against the skin, anything your hands are touching. Any taste, sensation in the mouth. Noticing any aromas in the air. Then shifting your awareness to anything you can see, even if your eyes are closed. Light, dark, squiggles, colour. And then moving your awareness to anything you can hear, sounds. And even as you do this, thoughts will come. It's okay, it's no problem. They can just be there and perhaps you can let them just pass through the field of your awareness. And when you notice you've got caught up in thinking, just bring your awareness back to my voice or any sounds that you can hear. Sounds close by, even the sound of your own body. Sounds in the room. Sounds outside the room. And not even needing to think about the sound, just that sense of receiving it as sound. And then just come back to your breath. Again, maybe 3 conscious breaths, making the out breath just that little bit longer. Maybe there's a sigh. Just that sense of letting go. And when you're ready, just bring your awareness back into the room where you are. And just notice what you notice as a result of doing that little practice. It took us maybe about 3.5 minutes. Just notice if anything feels different. Was there any tension, any pressure that was able to be let go of in some way? Physically, mentally, emotionally? Just notice what you notice. Okay, so welcome to today, and I also want to acknowledge the elders of the land and where I'm broadcasting, the Gadigal people, their elders past, present and emerging. And I also want to acknowledge again that today's Father's Day. And so just an acknowledgement that there's many fathers out there doing a fabulous job and who are loved and cared for, and maybe they've received a little gift today, or maybe there's people out for lunch. But maybe there's also people who have acted as father figures to you, or maybe you've done that yourself for someone else. So just a little bit of a shout out to that. I mean, these relationships can have complexity. I mean, whilst this is a day that people often celebrate the fathers or the father figures, it can also be a day where there's a bit of sadness because perhaps there's separation. And that might be through death, or it might be through distance, or it might be through estrangement. There can be a little bit of sadness too for the men who have wanted to be fathers and have children and who haven't. So that can play a part as well. Also, there's some people out there who have got two fathers, and I'm just thinking that's double the gifts. So there's lots of different complexities around this, and there can be complexity in these relationships too. And in a way, it might link into some of the things we're going to talk about today, which is around exploring psychological pressure. And I wonder if some of you have had some psychological pressure around planning a Father's Day celebration, or some internal stress around, for whatever reason, not being able to do that. So I just wonder where that's sitting for you, and wanted to acknowledge that. So where are we going to go today in this hour that we've got together? Well, we're going to explore 4 types of psychological pressure. But in particular, we're going to look at internal pressure and how that might have come about and what we can do about it. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then all good. And also just a shout out to the fact that there probably will be people who will join this broadcast later on. Alrighty. So what do we mean when we say psychological pressure? What are we talking about? Well, simply, it's like when the mind's pulled in opposite directions. And as I say, there's 4 types. So the first one can be positive psychological pressure, and that can provide some initiation. It can provide motivation, especially when doubts or fears act as a bit of a barrier, and you need the extra energy to sort of tell yourself, you can do it, come on, this is going to be okay, it's a good outcome. So it functions to motivate. I definitely use this when I'm out cycling and I'm faced with a hill where my initial response is, I am never going to get up this hill. And then often I'd sort of say, look, just keep going, just keep going. You can stop whenever you want to, just keep going. And, you can do it, you can get a bit further. So it can be positive because its function is to motivate. The second type is, not surprisingly, negative psychological pressure. And that's got maybe a couple of aspects. So this can be when someone else applies some kind of like insistent pressure to force you to act in a way that might be, self-destructive. So I'm thinking there about, I don't know. I know I've experienced that in the past where people, well-intended, but people might encourage you to drink a bit more than you really had wanted to, or if you were trying to stop drinking alcohol, that sort of thing, or eating. Definitely. But this type of pressure can also be exerted by circumstance. Financial pressure, very common these days. Job loss, leading to financial pressure, or having to take on more work when other aspects in your life don't really cooperate so much with that. You might have other roles. External psychological pressure, the third type, this is very familiar to all of us. This is just the demands, well, not just the demands, it's the demands that we all face, where, you know, the demands of traffic, the demands of having to answer phone calls, texts, emails, the demands where you might have work and a carer's role, you know, those sorts of things. Traffic, did I say traffic? Um, and these type of pressures, these stimuli, in and of themselves, may be neutral. But the issue is how much control or choice do we feel that we actually have over these external demands? And that's where the stress comes in, where we feel as though we're maybe a bit overwhelmed and we don't have that capacity to choose. But today the focus is going to be on internal psychological pressure. The pressure that originates internally and concerns like a sense of duty, if you like. It can also be dictated by distress, fear, anger, other emotions or moods, but its defining characteristic is that it always arises in your own mind. So, for example, these includes all the internal shoulds, ought, must, have to. Okay, so this may have been relevant today for some of you. You know, I really should organise that lunch for my family. I have to invite them all over to my place. I have to cook the best lunch, or I have to get the right cake or the right gift, whatever it might be. So the should, ought, must, have to get this done today. Okay, I mustn't look bad. I can't leave the house if there's dishes in the sink. A friend of mine who I go walking with was very bemused by the fact that I used to say after every bushwalk I go home, shower, get into my pyjamas, and that's me for the rest of the day. And this friend was like, "What? You wear your pyjamas during the day?" And I'm like, "Yeah, after a bushwalk, like no guilt." And she's, "I don't think I could do that, you know." So there's all this stuff kind of like that. It's like a pushy sort of sub-personality that prods us to do better, have more, do more. And when we don't measure up, when we don't achieve it, there can be harsh criticism that sort of cracks the whip to keep us going. And this results in often as forming quite rigid ideas. I can't be in my pyjamas during the day, that's not acceptable. About what we have to look like, what it looks like to be successful, you know, owning the right car, going to the right school, the right clothes. Then we often start shooting on other people. And what on earth would it be like to be on the receiving end of that? So whether the pressure's internal or whether it's external, Rick Hanson, a psychologist that I follow, writes about the fact that whether it's internal or external, it activates the dopamine circuits in the brain. So the motivational circuits that use dopamine, the chemical receptor. And dopamine, it tracks expected results. So the answering the emails, the making the phone calls, the doing the housework. And when we achieve, dopamine levels rise, which helps us feel relieved. And also some natural opioids come out that gives us a sense of feeling pleasure. So that all sounds good so far. But here's the thing. On the way to that desired result, dopamine levels actually sink a little bit, which brings unpleasant sense of stress, unease, pushing, pressure. And if or when, because we're human, when we don't achieve the desired outcome, whatever the should is, then dopamine levels plummet, which feels like disappointment, frustration, even despair sometimes. So to avoid that, we often push harder getting caught up in this sense of wanting and desire. Now, this system works really well in emergencies to keep us motivated. It's ideal, or to meet a deadline, on those occasions. Great, no problem. But being motivated by need, urgency, pressure, often results in a really narrow focus in our minds and kind of tunnel vision about how things should be. And this can feel tense. It can trigger a stress response. And again, okay in the short term, but we don't want chronic activation of the stress system, because we know that that has negative outcomes and consequences on our well-being. Sometimes we're trying to do too much with too little. Sometimes we're trying to live up to unrealistic expectations, by comparing ourselves sometimes to others when we feel as though we're falling short. And eventually we're so hard on ourselves that it feels like we're running on an empty bucket, that there's not much left. So where do these shoulds come from? Should, ought, must, have to. Well, one aspect is that, growing up, we all had to adapt into the families that we were born into. And we may have taken on certain roles. We may have worked out early on what we needed to do or how we needed to be in order to get our needs met, in order to be cared for, in order to be loved. So we may have taken on, being responsible. We may have taken on that, looking after other people had to come first, and we even make up beliefs to support it. So these messages, went in very, very young as that felt sense. And, when we make up these beliefs, mum and dad need me to be smart, mum and dad need me not to have needs because maybe there's a sick sibling. I need to be beautiful, I need to be successful, I need to be clever, smart, whatever it might be. These become unquestioned beliefs because they went in very, very young. They're automatic. And at Quest we call them second nature. Second nature to me, to when X happens, I'll run around and make sure everybody else is okay. It's second nature to me because I'm the responsible one for me to put on the family lunch when it's Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, and it has to be perfect and it has to be just right, So these automatic beliefs that then manifest in behaviour, when they're there without awareness, they can run the show, influencing, our jobs, our partners, our relationship with others. So paying attention to the language that we use, and in this instance, again, we're talking about the should, ought, must, have to, helps to build awareness to when we're just habitually reacting from an old pattern. And sometimes those old patterns, unquestioned, can keep us really small. So, bit of a reflective question. How, where, when do these words come up for you? So I'm not talking about the occasional use of these words, I'm talking about the pattern of it when you hear yourself. I should, ought, must, have to. And what happens when you don't? This is the other problem with the should. We've put that internal pressure on ourselves, and then when we don't do it, when we don't eat well, go for a walk, ring a friend, meditate, answer the email, what's the flip side? We might feel guilty, and then other old beliefs can come up around feeling like a failure. Or we push through and we do it. I should go to the Father's Day lunch that my sister has organised, or my sister-in-law has organised, even though every bone in my body is saying I don't want to go, but I'll go. And then sometimes we carry a bucket full of resentment because we don't want to be there. So it's tricky, this should, isn't it? So on the one side there can be guilt, on the other side there can be resentment. So what would it be like to, think about a more responsive way, um, where maybe we have more choice. Maybe it's more responsive rather than reactive. To say, well, I could go, but I'm choosing not to. Or I could go, but I'll only go for an hour and I'll catch up for the cake and the coffee, whatever it might be. Because when you use the shoulds, who does it remind you of? There's often that sense of it being an internalized authority. Those parental figures, perhaps, or the school teachers, or the nuns, sometimes the peer group as well. When we get to early adolescence, our parental figures don't have as much influence as they one time did, and the peer group becomes really important. So, where did the shoulds come from? You know, basically it's someone else's version of you, because that internalized authority has maybe told you, well, you should do your homework first and, then you can play, or you need to clean up your room first. You ought to study for your exams, you know, you get the idea. And some of these have quite a driven, kind of righteous quality around them. Um, they're examples sometimes of even either or thinking, and has little flexibility attached. So imagine, what would it be like to drop some of the shoulds? Can you even begin to entertain that? Because for some people, even that feels quite stressful. And we don't want to make this another pressure. But what would it feel like? Possibly a little bit more freeing, rather than just habitually reacting to the old script. It might feel freeing, like, because we've got a little bit more choice, a little bit more kind of agency, perhaps. Um, it might be that sometimes the should gets in the way of us using our true skills and talents. You know, how many people end up in jobs or relationships that are deadening because they should, it's a steady job, or I need this income, or whatever it might be, um, or because fear's in the driver's seat, I can't leave, I can't even think about applying for another job, you know. I used to think that many, many years ago. I'd worked in healthcare for over 35 years, and even the thought of working outside that was just absolutely terrifying. So I did, for many, many years, I kept, quite small and driven out of fear. It's like, I should just stick with this because it's what I know. So it can pull us away from our true path. But maybe we can ask ourselves, is the should really true? If I don't go for the walk, meditate, ring a friend today, do the housework, will it really matter in the overall grand scheme of things? Will it really matter? Is the should more or less helpful in the current situation or in the current circumstance? Must it really be done like this? Must it really be done in this particular time frame? Does that make a big difference to the outcome? Maybe there's other things like, must I always be first? Must I always keep up appearances? Can I never wear my pyjamas during the day at home? I mean, some of these things are silly, but others aren't. They're quite significant. Must I always keep up appearances? Meet other people's needs before my own? And think about the consequences of thinking that you do have to do that. Some of these things have major health consequences. So, do I have to do the housework on a Wednesday, for example? Do I need to stick with the job? Do I need to stick with that relationship? So, asking the question, is this really true? Or is this just an old pattern of thinking, behaving that I've fallen into, that I've never known it to be different? So, asking that question can be really, really useful. And then dropping the shoulds, and this can be perhaps where some of the tension comes in, because dropping the shoulds can be freeing on the one hand, but it can also expose our vulnerabilities and some difficult feelings on the other hand. I mean, maybe some difficult feelings arise and some support might be needed. The shoulds might have protected us from taking certain risks. You know, when I think about me being in healthcare for all those years and I had several jobs within it, other people would have looked at me thinking, you know, I was quite successful. But I used to sometimes brush my teeth at night and think to myself, if I never do anything else, you know, I'm going to be so disappointed, you know, when I retire or when I die, if I've never done anything else but work in this particular field. And so the question is, well, why didn't I? Why didn't I leave before I did? It's because I was terrified. And I was so terrified that even when the thought came up, I couldn't even entertain the thought, not really. And I then told myself another story that I, I didn't have the skills, that I had the skills in this area, but, you know, outside this, you know, probably I would never get the job. Or if I did, that would be more terrifying because I'm bound to fail. They'll then find out I'm an imposter. So can you see how this goes round and round and round? So yeah, let's be respectful here and saying that, you know, dropping the shoulds may have protected us from taking these certain risks. At one time, that might even have been adaptive. You know, the risk to speak out, the risk to say no in some situations, in a work situation or in certain family of origin situations, you know, may not have been the best thing. You know, that might have produced another risk. So it may have been adaptive at one time, but is that still the case now? And as I say, sometimes then we might need a little bit of support. You know, we might need to talk this through with a good friend, a mentor, a counsellor. If we find that even considering dropping the should is really scary, and it's the fear that's actually holding us back. I've often heard Patria say, you know, in terms of when participants on a program say, oh, you know, that feels really scary, or, you know, and she often says, well, yeah, that combination between being a little bit exciting and a little bit scary is kind of like the right combination. And similarly, there's that sense that I've had before around, okay, something feels really challenging, okay, and I don't want to be too challenged. You know, that feels challenging, but do I equally have support to go with that challenge? Because the combination of challenge and support is often when we thrive. Because being held back by fear and sticking to old patterns, you know, can be deadening. But if we've got the appropriate level of challenge held together by the appropriate level of support, then that's a pretty powerful combination in where we can perhaps thrive. And who doesn't want to thrive? So today there might be, for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, there might be an opportunity for you to start to notice, because this is about bringing it to your awareness, some of the words, these words that automatically come out, you know, our mouth, our language. And sometimes you might initially notice it in someone else, when someone else says, oh, I really should fill in the blank. I must, blah, 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 blah. I ought to, they say, with every bone in their body, giving a clear indication that they don't want to do it. So you'll probably start to hear it in someone else and you'll go, oh, there it is. There it is. I've noticed that. Then you might start to notice when it comes out your mouth. And that might take a while. And it might be out and gone before you realise it. But after a while, you start to notice the pattern, and you might even notice the particular pattern around where the shoulds, ought, must, have to lie. What do they relate to? What do they link into? And what behaviours do they link into as well? So you might start to notice that for a while. Then you'll notice it comes into your mouth and you're about to say it and you stop yourself mid-sentence. Maybe it's out and you choose to take it back. You might say, no, I don't have to do that. I'm choosing to, or I've decided to, or I've decided not to. And that'll go on for a little while too. And then you might notice that it comes into your head, but you can stop it before it gets to your mouth. And that will go on for a while. And then you'll notice that you just don't need it anymore. And it's kind of not there as much. And when it does come into your head, when it does come out your mouth, it's with conscious awareness. Or on the occasions that you do use it, you go, oh, there it is. Does that really feel like a choice? Or is that someone else's version of me that I should or must have to do something that I'm not remotely interested in doing? And that's building awareness. And for those of you who have been following Quest for a while, you'll be familiar with the importance that we place on awareness. Awareness is a game changer. Before we have awareness, we're operating very automatically. But just having awareness is the game changer. It's the critical moment because we're not on automatic anymore. And when we're not on automatic anymore, we can then begin to have more choice. So we go from that reactive state, should, ought, must, have to, because it's a pattern and it's automatic, to a more responsive state where we get to choose. I'm choosing to go to this family event. It's a conscious choice. I kind of know how it's going to play out, but for various reasons I think it's important enough and I'm going to go. Or I'm going to go to this family event and I'm only going to go for an hour. I'm going to set some limits on it. But I'm choosing. And equally, I'm choosing not to go. I've decided not to go. I've decided that my internal resources just aren't up to it at this period of time. So I'm choosing not to. Thank you very much for asking me. But I'm going to say no. And that too can be scary. That too can be really scary. Especially in a family where all those hooks start to come out. Oh, you're not coming. But so-and-so's driving from whoop whoop, and they really were looking forward to seeing you. Or, oh, but you said that you'd bring your carrot cake. No one's ever said that to me, by the way. But you get the idea. And our job is to then notice the hooks and how we get hooked back in. And the hook might just be the tone of voice, might be the silent treatment. Okay, but our job is to, again, be aware of that. How do we get hooked back into these patterns? So, we've talked about the importance of choice. We've talked about the importance of reframing, the shoulds, ought, must, have to. What are some other ways that we can drop the pressure? And keeping in mind that there's no pressure to drop the pressure. We don't want to make this yet another should that we're having to deal with. But a few ideas. Again, when you notice that you've got caught up in the should or you're going to go down that track, try and create a little bit of a pause moment or a buffer. Slow things down, you know. Take a couple of breaths. Give yourself time to figure out if this is really a priority or if this is really something that you want to do. Get really clear about it, but give yourself some space. That moment to pause is really golden. And sometimes we can create a buffer by temporarily removing ourselves from a situation where, the internal pressure might be that I have to respond immediately. Okay, so we may create some space by just making an excuse and going to the toilet, giving ourselves a few minutes to think about it. We can create some space by saying, look, thanks very much, I'm going to give that some thought and then I'll get back to you. I'm going to have a look at my diary and I'll get back to you. Just creating that space. And sometimes if it doesn't involve something external, we have to create that space for ourselves. Does that really need to be done right now? Does it have to be done in that particular way in this particular time frame? So again, ask that question. Also awareness, we can get awareness and by listening to our body. Is there tension there? Would I even think about doing that particular activity, calling the friend, going for the walk, meditating, going to the family lunch, whatever it might be? Is everything in my body holding some tension? Okay, well, see if we can release the tension and then be aware of some of those shoulds that might be rattling around in our mind. Are they really true? So, also just, I suppose, let's be a bit easier on ourselves. That's a useful one. You know, that sort of compassionate, inquiry. Are the shoulds and musts, are they really true? And would it matter if that didn't get done perfectly? Would it matter if it didn't get completed today? How would you respond to your best friend who was in this situation? Um, Perfectionism often drives a lot of the shoulds, the should, having to look a certain way, produce the best lunch, whatever it might be, complete the best report, the perfect report with no mistakes. Yeah, healthy striving is useful, but what's the saying? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Sometimes good enough is good enough. And be realistic about how long things really take. If you're someone who's been really used to working at high speed, fitting in a lot of things into the one day, juggling lots of different priorities, then maybe there can be that pause moment to take a step back and think, how long will some of those things really take, and how can I give myself the gift of time? How can I be a little bit stretchy around this? And try not to take on commitments that'll be hard to fulfill. I use someone who says yes first and then regrets it later because you think you should, because you want to be the good girl, the good dad, the good brother, the good employee, the good friend. Okay? So create boundaries sometimes. That practice of sometimes having to say no. Yeah, I would like to support you with this. I would like to help you out with this, but my calendar is really full right now. Can that wait another week? Can it wait another month? Yeah. Thank you very much for asking me to take on that extra role at work or that project, but I'm fully committed right now. So creating boundaries. Thank you very much for asking me. I'd like to take that on, but can you help me work out what I would need to let go of in order to make space for that? I'd like to do a good job, but I'm going to need to find more time. So help to create some healthy boundaries. And then probably really importantly, coming back to this moment in which all things are probably basically all right, safe enough, fed enough, and loved enough. Do we have to add anything to it? And coming back to the present moment in this way, I think is really helpful in terms of also getting a little bit of space from what goes on up here, like that reminder that basically right now, you know, I've got something to wear, I've got something to eat, I've got something to drink, I've got water that's clean, I'm in a safe environment, if that's the case. And basically, everything is all right, right here, right now. Because when it comes to those internal pressures, a lot of it we are actually generating ourselves and following, you know, a perceived really old script that we may have been following for a very, very long time. So, my suggestion, as well as noticing where you should on yourself, is, and that might be enough for right now, but is also then, for me, there's another part to this. And for me, the second part is noticing how I should on other people. I think that I've got a much better handle than I used to have on shooting on myself, should, ought, must, have to. I can at least do the inquiry in my head around it. But it can still be pretty automatic for me to should on those people who are close to me. And even if I don't say it out loud, I certainly might be thinking it about what they should do. And if it was me, this is what I would do. And of course, my way is, you know, the right way or the best way. You know, you can see how it takes on a life of its own. And getting in touch with what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. Most of us actually don't really like to be told how to do something unless we've asked for it. So just being mindful, raising that awareness about when we're shooting on others. And whose issue is it really? You know, we may genuinely have the other person's best interests at heart, definitely, definitely. That can be the case. But is this the way to go about it? And often if we're given feedback or we think something might be better done in a different way or we want to negotiate that, then, you know, using our negotiation skills might be much more helpful. Or using that little formula that we often talk about at Quest. I notice, I imagine, I feel, and what I need. Rather than you always or you should. You have to, you must. So what if we could change the should, ought, must, have to into I notice, you know? You should empty that dishwasher, you know, before you go out the house in the morning, you know, talking to the kids, you know, you should do your homework before you fill in the blank. So imagine if you could change that to, I notice that most days you prioritise coming home late from school rather than doing your homework. I imagine that that's working really well for you and you want a bit of downtime. But I feel concerned that by the time you get home, you're too tired to do the homework, and often it ends up in a bit tension between us, or we often end up having an argument. I wonder if it would be possible for us to work on this together. I wonder if it would be possible that for some days you go out and do your own thing after school, and let off a bit of steam. And then other days you come home and do the house, do the school work, do your homework, whatever it might be. So I notice, I imagine, I feel, because I need things to be less tense between us. And I'm sure you would prefer that too. So maybe sometimes I notice, I imagine, I feel is a much better way to go than blaming or shooting, and see how that plays out in the relationship. So for the little time that we've got left, I'm going to suggest that we lower the pressure right here, right now, in the last few minutes we've got together, and we actually create a little bit of a pause moment between going from this activity to the next. So I thought we might do just a gentle relaxation together, and there's an opportunity there for you to use it in a reflective way, to perhaps just bring into your awareness where you may be using some of that reactive language. So no need to change anything. Just perhaps close your eyes if it's available to you, or lower your gaze. And start again by taking those 3 conscious breaths. And letting the out breath just be that little bit longer than the in breath. Relaxing your shoulders, relaxing your arms, relaxing the facial muscles, letting go of any gripping in the tummy, noticing the movement of the belly as you breathe. Just letting any tension just flow out of the body. And then consciously, just reflect on any behaviour, situation, thought pattern that you can identify that includes one of those should, ought, must, have to. Where are you maybe a little bit hard on yourself? In what areas do you think you may have some less flexible ideas about how things should be? And if you can think or just bring to your awareness just one of these situations of shoulds, without making it, anything traumatic or anything too overwhelming, but maybe just a pattern that you notice. And perhaps just ask yourself, in this relaxed frame of mind, is this really true? That I should, ought, must, have to fill in the blank? Or that I have to do this in this particular way? You might want to ask yourself or reflect on, where do you think this should came from? What's its origin? And is it serving me well now? And if you can use your imagination, imagine what it would be like to let go of that should, let go of the grip that can have on you. Would there be a sense of freedom? Or are there some uncomfortable feelings that might come up? Or does it feel too risky? Not judging anything, just accepting what's there. And if you were to let go of that internal psychological pressure, what would that feel like? What would it feel like in your body, in your mind? And perhaps now just reflect on one small step you could take towards that. If that pressure is no longer serving you, or if it's no longer required, what's one small step you could take to move away from that? And now just let all of that go and just be in the moment. Notice parts of your body that are relaxed. Notice any part that's still tense. Seeing if you can let that go just a little bit more. And noticing the contrast between areas of tension and areas that are relaxed. What feels more easeful? And now let's just spend a few moments together, just in silence, being aware that thoughts will come and go. That's okay. Perhaps just follow your breath. And now very gently, just start to bring some awareness. Just aware of the room that you're in, your position on the chair or what's supporting you. And maybe start to bring in a little bit of movement as you open your eyes. And maybe we've been together, we've been sitting for nearly an hour, so maybe it's important to have a little bit of a stretch in any way that feels comfortable for you. Maybe a few shoulder shrugs. The neck over to one side and the other. And again, notice what you notice. So if you do feel any different as a result of doing that little practice, then pay attention to that. It's the moments when things are different. So thank you very much for joining me today. The setup on the Facebook feed is a little bit different to when I've done it before. and I have no capacity to see any comments that people may have made. So I will go back in and look later and reply to any comments that have been made. But thank you very much for joining me. I hope you all have a lovely afternoon. I'm not sure what the weather's like where you are, but it's beautiful sunshine here today in Sydney. So enjoy the rest of your day and take care, and I'll see you again very soon. Okay, bye bye everyone. Bye bye.